It is always a good idea to start with planning your questions. If you're rewriting the text, it is absolutely necessary. Consider whether or not you're going to ask simple literal recall and summary questions, or if your students will be able to answer some higher level questions. Also, you will need to read the same book over and over, so plan to vary the questions. Even some elementary books have a lot of text. You will need to decide how much you need to condense based on the needs of your students. Leave in as much detail as possible without making it too long for their attention span. In elementary picture books, you may just retype the text and paste over the original. In chapter books, you will actually create a new book. This is where those spark notes come in handy. If you have a program such as Writing with Symbols, SimWriter, or even BoardMaker, you can retype your text and add picture symbols as needed. Consider the amount of symbols your students will benefit from. Some students can read complete sentences if they have symbol support. Others will be distracted by too many symbols. If you do not have a program or your students do not yet use symbols, you can insert small pictures above key words in the text. Here is an excerpt from Call of the Wild, and then an example of how it might look after being condensed. As you can see in the original text, sentences are constructed in a way that make them more difficult to understand. There are also several vocabulary words that are not common, such as toil, groping, or veranda. You may choose to simplify these words, or, if they are important to the story, define them. In the book Cheaper by the Dozen, clothes is chosen as a vocabulary word. The picture symbol seen above is added since the students will not know the word. This word is chosen because it is both important to the story and it has functional value. You will want to choose a balance of words, a few words that will have meaning to the students outside of the story, and some that enhance the meaning of the story but may also be unique to the story. Here are some other examples of vocabulary words and examples of visual cues. The word cloud always appears in red. The word dance is always highlighted in yellow. Here is an example from the adapted chapter book Holes. The repeated storyline and the vocabulary are pre-selected and reviewed with the student. Most of these vocabulary words are functional. However, words like camp and possibly lake would be words that the students may not know, but these words are important to understanding the story. As you are planning your vocabulary words and your response options for comprehension questions, think about the response options that you will need to present to your students. Will you need words, words with symbols, words with photos, or possibly even objects? Sometimes we come across words in books that are not common or we know will not be familiar to our students. Sometimes these are important to the story and possibly will be vocabulary words that you will choose. We will then need to define the vocabulary words, as well as other words that the students may not know but are important. Here is another example of how you might define a word that is important. If you have participated in the Story-Based Lessons module, you are familiar with the need for a repeated storyline. You will need to select a line that reflects the main idea of the book, or for chapter books, the main idea for that chapter. This will allow students to participate in the reading. They will be able to use a voice output device to finish reading the line. This is similar to defining the words, but instead you write a sentence or two that explains the word.